when younger people get involved, they do a better job because if they fucked it up, they're going to suffer. But if old people fucked it up, if Donald Trump fucked it up, he will soon die anyway because he's an old man.
But young people see things differently than older people, and their perspective is needed to uproot habits that older people won't change because they're their habits and they benefit from them. They can only do their best. And even doing their best, they're going to fail sometimes.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us in today's episode of the Obehi Podcast. I remain your host, Obehi Ewanfo. Today, we're talking about, of course, always, we're talking about storytelling. So today, I'm going to be talking with Fred, who joins me from the United States. And he's going to be talking to us about his life, his work, what he's doing, and why he's doing what he's doing. That's actually what we are always talking about here because we want to connect to the people behind the brand. Sometimes it is important that people pay more attention to that rather than just maybe the color, the logo, and things like that. So, Mr. Fred, could you please tell the people who you are? Let's start from there.
Who am I? I mean, I'm a senior citizen who has worked at Stanford for 30 years. I have a grown child, and I have researched and taught forgiveness internationally for a long time. It's that is my, I guess, my contribution to the world, or my unique contribution to the world, is helping people not be so pissed off at their life.
All right, that is very interesting, Mr. Frederic. That is really interesting. Now, we would like to learn more about you before we can learn about what you do. So, when you look back in history, which year can you pick that you were a boy at this time? Because we want to, from that moment, begin to piece together the story behind you. Tell me about that.
I mean, I can remember, I grew up in New York. I can remember getting off the school bus around Halloween, and it was already pretty cold. It's the end of October. And I remember getting off the school bus and thinking, it's really cold. I'm not sure this is what I want. And that was probably 2 decades before I moved to California, where I've lived mostly since. But I can still picture getting off that school bus and having the leaves falling off the trees with all their colors, and kind of having an insight that this was not the weather that I would choose.
All right. So, which year was that, and why is this particular memory important for you? Why did you pick this one instead of many other things that you could have picked as a young adolescent?
I mean, I don't have that many memories of childhood. I have a memory of building a fort in the woods behind my parents' house. I have memories of like all sorts of fantasy play, but I don't have a rich abundance of those memories. So that's part of the reason. I'm going to say I was 10 years old. I'm making a guess 12 when that happened. So that would have been 1966, which is a long time ago.
Absolutely. That is why we are deliberately. That's why we are deliberately picking this date, 1966. I wasn't born yet, so
I'm sure.
so I'm sure that a lot of people that are listening to us now were not even born yet then. Therefore, it becomes very important for us because now we are picking a date in history to examine, to understand, to see what was happening there. I didn't see it. So you now helping us to see what you saw become very valuable. So um, tell me more about those years. What was the American like for you? What was New York like for you? What more memory can you remember to piece
Yeah.
together? Yeah.
I mean, I remember growing up in a very safe neighborhood. Um, families were mostly intact. Um, the war in Vietnam was heating up, and that ultimately changed dramatically the sense of a coherent culture and a kind of safety. But 1966, it was still a year or two away from like burning through things. I remember going to parks, but I lived in a safe area, and that was huge. I mean, you could go where you wanted to, and you could walk to. I walked to school, and there was. I mean, my parents didn't have to caution me much. The only like lurking place that wasn't so safe was New York City. Like you had to do plenty of cautions if you went to New York City. Um, but I think I grew up in a country that had more innocence than it does now.
Okay. Can you explain what that means? More innocent than it is now. What does that mean?
Families were almost always intact. There was very little divorce at that time. Um, the political divisions were not as harsh. That did change with the Vietnam War. Um, like my neighbor came and borrowed sugar from my mother. He didn't always lock your door. And my mother told me stories of growing up in New York City where she rode the subway in the middle of the night and nobody thought anything of it. Those are the kind of thoughts that I had with innocent.
Now, you made mention of Vietnam twice. Why that might be relevant for people that are listening to us now is that some people are making comparison of what is probably going to be happening to between United States and Venezuela's comparing it to what have happened in the case of Vietnam. Because the United States government using the American military uh, took away. Some people call it kidnapping of a city president, taking it from where he is in his own country to New York, where you are, or actually where you were born. So because you made mention of New York and also Vietnam, I'm trying to understand what was your opinion of Vietnam at the time? What can you tell us about that? If there is any comparison that we can see.
I mean, being a young man, um, there was a lot of apprehension about being drafted to fight in a war so far away where there was no obvious reason to be in that war. I have many memories of apprehension about what I would do if I were drafted. Would I go? Would I go to Canada? The war became more and more unpopular as people found out the dishonesty around it. So, but in 1966, it wasn't as clear then that this war was not just a mistake, but was harming both our country and their country unnecessarily. I remember going to protest marches against the war, um, But even then, like the kind of thing that got me into being a forgiveness teacher, I remember marching against the war and like yelling insults at the president of the United States. And even then, inside of me, there was a part of me that knew the war was wrong, the way it was handled was wrong, but I never felt totally comfortable just insulting another human being in that way. And that was one indication of what was going to come later for me.
Hmm. Is there anything you can say about the mass psychology of the United States at the time and the mass psychology of the United States of today, in the sense of the awareness of the people about the political future, the political arithmetic, if you want to put it like that, how this political class maneuver their political game, and of course they drag every person along with it, because if the United States goes to war with Venezuela, it is not Donald Trump that is going to fight a war. He will never fight. American citizens will go to fight. So whatever they decide, it affects the people. Therefore, the people have a role to play, whether they agree or not. So I'm trying to understand what kind of comparison can we make about how did people see their participation in voicing out in agreement or disagreement in the time when you were a young adolescent, the time of Vietnam, and probably what is happening today. Can we learn anything from that?
When my parents' generation went to World War II, it was considered patriotic. The Vietnam War, it became obvious that the reasons for going for the war were not true, and that the government knew that they couldn't win the war the way it was being fought. And that catalyzed a huge rebellion against the war, but it was not a full, country's rebellion. I remember marching and protesting, and there were plenty of people pushing back and saying, you're not patriotic. And I remember arguing with somebody down my block who was fully in support of the Vietnam War to try to, stop communism's spread. The one thing that somebody of my generation would say was young people then seemed a lot more involved and concerned about what was going on than the young people do today. Um, I don't understand that, and I can only, I just remember the passion that a segment of my generation had for, peace, for civil rights, for women's rights. It was a powerful undergirding of who we were as an emerging generation. It galvanized us. Um, that does not seem to be as true, but I'm not as plugged in to what it's like to be 18 now. But we had a kind of, I mean, they called it the counterculture. I don't know what that actually means, but there was a big segment of people growing up when I grew up who were actively not okay with a needless war, mistreatment of certain people, that was important for a significant period of time for a significant number of people.
All right. Thank you so much for
And,
that.
and I
Hey,
got something from that. I did. Like, I grew up with that, and it still lives in me somewhere. Here in the United States, a good number of the people who marched in the protests against Donald Trump were my age. They weren't younger people. It was that it appeared to be that segment still doing its thing.
Hmm. Is it possible that maybe the younger generation, because now you obviously be a grandfather, you will see young people now,
It's true.
yeah, growing up, running around, and maybe feeling unconcerned about the situation of their country. Of course, this is not happening only in the United States. It's all across, whether you are talking of maybe here in Europe where I live or in Africa where I'm coming from. A lot of young people are less involved in politics as against what was happening in the past. Because, you see, in the Nigerian Civil War, the president of the country at the time, okay, was the military head of state, was less than 14. He was 30 something years at the time. 30 something years, he was the head of state of one of the most popular, actually the most populous country in Africa. Today, instead, we have people that have passed 70, 80, and they are the leaders, and they cannot even lead. They don't know what leadership means. So it shows this big decline in the young people taking role in politics. Therefore, the other people who maybe do not understand how, because they are, of course, okay, I don't want to make the argument of age, but we can see that when younger people get involved, they do a better job because if they fucked it up, they're going to suffer. But if old people fucked it up, if Donald Trump fucked it up, he will soon die anyway because he's an old man. But the
But
younger generation will suffer.
younger people have a different kind of brain.
Why are they not getting involved more?
Well, I can't answer, but young people see things differently than older people, and their perspective is needed to uproot habits that older people won't change because they're their habits and they benefit from them. And so part of the renewal each generation is to do some changes from the generations in the past that have gotten stuck. Like that seems essential to how our species should evolve itself.
All right. Is it possible that maybe the younger generation of today, talking of today, they are more occupied with the with the distraction of the technology, therefore they don't care. Everybody is busy with computer game, internet, and computer. Therefore, they feel concerned, and this maybe might be working for the interest of those who want to control them, because now you have been given an objective to focus on. Therefore, you cannot focus on maybe the society as it were. It's just a thought. It's just a reasoning. Is that, can we even think like that?
I think everybody's more distracted than they were. I think everybody struggles to deal with too much stimulation, not just younger people, but there is some good research that the overuse of technology is harming younger people's emotional development. The one other thing that I think is relevant is I grew up in a time of relative economic prosperity. And so we were raised with, it wasn't that hard to get health insurance, and you could buy a house for a modest amount of money, and that's all gone. And so must be a much greater uncertainty economically, and a much higher sense of fear. I knew at some level that, like, I could afford rent. Like, my apartment that I rented somewhere in college in a little town in upstate New York was like $50 a month. And, like, you can be a rebel and you can do whatever you want if you know that you can pay $50 a month or $100 a month to rent a place, that must have some impact along with technology, which I see personally has limited some of my capacities. Like I don't as easily sit and think deeply, and I may jump to conclusions more readily because I'm so used to everything so speeded up. And visually, I'm constantly like moving from one thing to another. So I don't think I pay attention the way I did. And if young people were raised like that, they may be missing some of the components of full brain functioning.
Do that have any consequence as we move into the future? Okay, now I'm asking that question because the younger generations are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. If we overstimulate them and therefore make it impossible for them to concentrate, are we, and they are going to be the leader of tomorrow, what kind of tomorrow are we going to have? Because it's not easy to run a country, to run a society. We need people to be fully focused. How do we do that?
Well, I mean, it's not that simple. I can tell you, even at Stanford, people read less and they watch more. And different things happen when you read than when you watch. Like watching tends to stimulate more emotional reactivity. Reading is designed often for a certain kind of pondering, so it creates different kinds of inner experience. But the world has speeded up. And so if you're going to be a leader of a speeded up world, you can't just be an older person who has certain habits that are slower than the reality that they're facing. So it's not a simple missing or not getting. It's how do you find people skillful enough to be successful in the time that they're living in?
All right. That is a question we'll probably leave for the future because okay, I'm not pessimistic. I'm very hopeful. I know that the people will find a solution. Yeah, because of course we will not be there in that world. I'm talking of maybe the world that is going to come 500 years from now, 200 years from now, 150 years from now, 100. I'm not going to be there. But at least if we can do the best we can to prepare them for that kind of world, it will be okay. But in any case, they will figure it out because they are going to leverage the collective consciousness that we have. They will figure it out. Anyway, now let's move to the second segment of the conversation. You are in Stanford. That is one of the most respected university in the world. What are you doing there? How did you get there?
I mean, I'm not doing as much there as I used to. I'm semi-retired. What I do now is I teach at the Graduate School of Business. I teach mindfulness and like positive psychology, how to be a nice person. I coach some of the sports teams in mindfulness and positive psychology, one of the women's basketball and women's volleyball. But I'm no longer a teacher of undergraduates. I gave that up a couple of years ago. I do some graduate education in the same things of mindfulness. I've been here a long time. I've started some programs at Stanford in wellness and contemplative education. I started the Stanford Forgiveness Project. I've done research in cardiovascular well-being, and I've taught undergraduate classes in a good variety of things over the years.
All right. That is a lot of work that you'll be doing there. But tell me, how did you get there? What is your major?
my major.
Yeah.
My my PhD is from Stanford, and it's in counseling and health psychology. I got that PhD in 1998, and I have stayed there in different roles ever since.
If you want to describe your body of work in one maybe simple phrase, what would you call it?
Well, I can't do it in one, but I could do it in like one and a half. I remember when I was doing my dissertation, and I saw all these dissertation studies that didn't seem like they would help anybody. And I wanted to do a dissertation that would at least be of use to somebody on the planet. So my dissertation was on forgiveness. It was teaching college students to forgive people who had hurt them. It seemed like, I don't know, it seemed like a waste of life if what I did in the world wasn't of some use. So that would be one. The second, what kept me teaching forgiveness for all those years was it would be nice if I could use whatever skills I had to help some people reduce their suffering and maybe like have a little bit better experience of life. That kept me going for decades. That maybe in a small way I could like reduce a little bit of the pain or suffering, a kind of Buddhist concept. Um, you know, that would be one of my contributions to this world.
That's lovely. That's valuable, highly, highly valuable. All right. Now, in your most active years in Stanford, what were you teaching? Who were you teaching?
I mean, I helped begin a program called Wellness Education at Stanford, and we ran a whole series of classes on how to be healthy, how to be happy, how to be compassionate, how to enjoy poetry, the different aspects of wellness. I taught some classes along that thing. I taught a meditation class. I taught a happiness class. I did teach a appreciating poetry class. Um, Again, by that time, it was really nice to just be in front of younger people and try to like give them some skills that might make their path through life a little bit easier.
Okay. Now, when you were teaching these people, this is Stanford now, I'm looking at a class of students and you are in front of them, imparting knowledge into them. What are you preparing them to become tomorrow, which is probably already today?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I think what I was trying to teach them was appreciate today, appreciate the life you have, try to live it with as much enthusiasm as you can, try to be healthy while you're living that life, and be kind to the people around you. It was more today oriented skills than tomorrow oriented skills.
Hmm. All right. I'm trying to imagine if maybe because now you are no like you say you're no longer in a more active role as a lecturer. You are more
It's
like
true.
sort of retired, correct?
About half retired, yeah.
Okay. So with me now that the student that they were teaching then, they are already adult now. Probably they are already managing people too because they are using your knowledge. They are putting your knowledge in practice. Is that correct?
At the Graduate School of Business, I teach exclusively business people who come to Stanford to learn skills to be usually better entrepreneurs. And my piece of that is to teach them while they're doing all their business, try to be a little bit happier and a little bit kinder to other people. I teach a sequence in mindfulness that is part of these programs that many of these people show up from all over the world, have no idea that I'm there. And like when I first walk in, it's like, what is this guy doing in a business program? But by the end, they appreciate the fact that you can also like put a little more attention and care to how you do what you do, not just what you do.
And what is their reaction like in the course of the training? What is usually their reaction like?
Surprisingly to me, it's very positive. People come away from there, not everybody, of course, but a significant percentage come away from there saying, wow, I had no idea that this would ever be part of a Stanford program, but I'm really glad it was part of it because it helped me maybe orient myself a little better, maybe go back home and treat the people I care for a little better, or maybe be able to manage my stress a little better. You often people are very appreciative of getting that boost. I have no idea what it means 5 years from then, but I know that when they leave, usually the 6 week program, they feel like they got a unanticipated benefit.
All right, that's great. You see, the conversation of today is really quite important. It's important because many of the people that you were training or you were influencing them, you were imparting your knowledge of positive psychology then, they will become the managers of tomorrow because, like I was saying before, Stanford is one of the most important universities in the world. So it means those people there will become the manager, the director, the executive in many international businesses. So my curiosity now is if you have had a chance to have a feedback from this individual, not all of them, maybe some of them, to see how what you have imparted then is helping them in today's work because you are making impact in the world.
I hear from them that it's made them easier to go through their day. It's helped improve their relationships, and it's allowed them to a little more appreciate the gift of their life. I would say that would be the overarching hope of what I teach is to a little more appreciate the gift of their life. And you know, I'm not that interested in their businesses. I'm much more interested in them as people.
But what is positive psychology? Why is it? How do you describe it?
um, Throughout the history of psychology, it was focused on what's wrong with people: anxiety, depression, anger, mistrust, all that stuff. Around 25 years ago in the United States, the head of the American Psychological Association decided that's a waste of human potential. We need to also focus on what's right with people, how they could live happier lives, not just less miserable, and how they can flourish, not just reduce depression and anxiety. So that shifted part of the emphasis in the field of clinical and applied psychology.
Based on your work and also on your field report, in the sense of the people that you are currently interacting with, I mean your students, what do you understand to be the causes of why people might be unhappy? So that you are not teaching them to sort of love themselves, live well, and things like that. But what is the causes of not having that? So that they need you because they are not able to live well. Now you teach them how to live well or to feel well.
There's a very simple Buddhist based answer to your question, which is that life itself has inherent difficulty. that we live in a world where everything changes. We can't hold on to things staying the same, and that we don't control many of the things that happen to us. Those two truths, that things change and they're not in our control, often cause suffering and they cause unhappiness. And almost everybody has to figure out something to deal with that. Some of the things we figure out are more or less successful. So many people, in order to deal with that difficulty, try to get more money or more success or more status. Maybe that will protect them. It doesn't work as well as people would hope. But other strategies have been proven. Nothing is perfect, but to have a little more success in dealing with life's inherent difficulties. And everybody needs some learning around that. It has nothing to do with any individual group or issue, or it's inherent in the human condition. So just to give you an example, I can tell a basketball player that when they're standing there on the free throw line, they can't guarantee that the ball is going to go in. They can only do their best. And even doing their best, they're going to fail sometimes. So what do you do with that? Like, knowing that it's not perfect, you can't ever be perfect. So some of the strategies that I've suggested to them are like, these are not unusual strategies. They're just like, hey, do the best you can. Or two, remember that even if you miss the shot, people will love you. Well, that allows them to not tighten up, not make missing a shot more of a big deal than it is, but also reminds them of certain truths, that everything I do in life has some uncertainty. And no matter how hard I try, it's never going to always work out the way I hoped. So there are, throughout history, people try to figure out ways to deal with that.
Do you also sometimes have to carry out research within Stanford, or maybe, I don't know, with a team of researchers or yourself to gather more information about these people that you are working with? Can you share anything in line with that?
I mean, I did a number of years on forgiveness training, and I was one of the early adapters, say, of research for forgiveness. And we as a group were able to show that people who forgive live happier, healthier experiences, and that they physically benefit and they mentally benefit. So I did a number of years on forgiveness research. We took a couple of years of a happiness class that we created on campus, and we researched its effect on the students. And it turned out that going through our happiness class made students less stressed and like have a better experience through after the 10 weeks of our class than they did before. And we've done a little bit of research on our forgiveness work internationally, that if you take people in very difficult international situations and you teach them to forgive, we can help reduce depression and some of the symptoms of stress. So I have spent some of my life as a researcher, and even in business. We did a long research project on financial advisors, showing that if you teach them again how to manage stress and be nicer people, they actually become more successful at work.
So, in some of these researches, how do you usually embark on? Is it like sending them a questionnaire, following them to see what they are going to do? Since you are talking about psychology, could you explain a bit about how that works?
I'm usually interested in like examining an intervention. So with the business people, we led them through some training and then coaching, and we measured through both questionnaire and objective data, both before the intervention and after the intervention, to see whether it made a difference. With the forgiveness work, we measured before the intervention, when the intervention ended, and then 6 weeks later to see if it had any staying power.
All right. Forgiveness. Are you telling the people to forgive themselves or to forgive other people? Can you expand on that?
I mean, it's more the quality of just forgive when you can, rather than what the object of forgiveness is. So, forgiveness is a space or a way of being in the world where you're not angry or feeling like a victim of your past. So you can be open to what's going on now. I mean, it's just a quality. Sometimes people have to let go of resistance to what they did. Other times it's people have to let go of resistance what other people did. And sometimes it's just the way life unfolded, that I had a tough, I was dealt a tough hand. So I'm just forgiving life itself. But it's the quality of coming to acceptance and peace now about my life.
Hmm. That is very interesting. Um, let's think about two incidents. I'm trying to see. Okay, these have been overcome, and of course, this is also going to be thanks to psychologists like you who help people to understand that. I'm talking of maybe 1994 genocide in Rwanda, where a group of people, these are friends. Okay, let's call them friends, that they are neighbors. One decide to exterminate nearly 1 million people in less than four months.
I know.
Now you need to put it together and say forgive and let's go. Another incident would be what happened in South Africa,
So
the
let
apartheid
so
regime.
let that's a fair question.
Yeah, tell me.
Like, how do you? I think it was like 800, thousand people or something in like 3 months, which is unfathomable. Um, and let's say that it's 2 years later, right? You have to look at the cost benefit of bitterness versus forgiveness. It's not just what's the benefit of forgiveness, it's what's the benefit of bitterness. And it turns out that long-term bitterness is not good for people, physical or mental well-being. And blaming the past for why your current life isn't working is very harmful for people's current lives. Like, it disempowers them. Most of the time, when people talk about forgiveness, they're concerned with the forgiveness part and take the bitterness part as healthy and normal, which I would argue it's not as healthy and normal as you might think. What is essential is grieving. And it's unfathomable to really grieve that kind of murderous rage. It is unfathomable. I've done work with people in Sierra Leone who have had all sorts of horrors done upon them. I've gone to Colombia after their civil war. I've never touched Rwanda, but the nightmare that people do on each other is horrifying. And to have a successful life, somehow we need to move past that and also see human goodness so we can see it more completely, because that's what we need to survive ourselves. Like, it's almost a survival thing that you have to grieve the desperate horror of what happened and not sugarcoat it. Seek justice where you can, but then for your own and your family's like flourishing, you have to move on.
All right. Now,
Give me your other one if you want. You brought up that.
yeah. That was the issue of South Africa. By the way, I'm going to put it together now, and I'll put you in a situation so that we can role play. Now, you look at the situation in South Africa, the apartheid regime. Then, after all these years, that you tell the black people and the white people, forget and let's move on. Of course, they have. I'm saying that both of this situation, whether in Rwanda or in South Africa, they have overcome the situation. They are still maturing on how to permanently let it go. No. Okay, you can also take other issues like what is currently happening in between Israel and the Palestine. That one day
I know.
this will be over, and now you will call the people of Israel and the people of Palestine. Let's make peace, or maybe what have happened in the Balkan region. So I'm trying to understand if you are called upon as an expert, you are sitting in the middle of these people, you want to reconcile them or you want to help them forgive because the topic is forgiveness. Where are you going to start? What would you do to make sure that the people can actually forgive themselves?
Well, the beginning is the difficult, horrible process of grieving one's losses. It starts with pain. And it starts with acknowledgement of how horrible human beings can be to each other. It can't start anywhere else. It just starts with that. And you're going to suffer. And you're going to be angry. And you're going to be depressed. And you're going to be scared. And you're going to want revenge. Those are all part of the human experience. The only question is for how long. It's not that you're not going to have that. It's just for how long. I'm going to say that the world needs people doing the work that I'm doing. I was good friends with Peter and Linda Beale, whose daughter Amy was killed in South Africa, and then they started the Amy Beale Foundation, and were pretty strong voices for the reconciliation, if possible, between the whites and the blacks, because their daughter, a Stanford student, was killed wrongly by some blacks who mistook her for someone else. They forgave and they came to that country to try to help heal the country. I'm still friendly with her mom. We are now looking for funding for a small demonstration project regarding Israel and Palestine. We're looking to bring maybe 12 people from each side together to see if we can create some dialogue around grieving and forgiveness. How the deepest answer to your question, though, that deep question was, you can forgive without reconciling. You need to forgive for your own well-being. Reconciling is a subsequent step. It may or may not happen. But the essential nature of not holding bitterness and blame is how human beings save themselves. It's like, you at least cleanse your heart and mind. Maybe these are not people you reconcile, or rejoin relationship with, that's a whole nother dimension. But the forgiveness piece is simply like, there's so much horror in this world. I just don't want to be buried by the horror that came to me. That's really what it is. And I want to still be able to see the beauty of the sun and love my children and not feel that life is just a bad deal.
Yeah,
And that's the necessity of forgiveness.
that's really beautiful. So the necessary question I will pull from there will be that maybe we're not going to be talking about justice when we're talking about forgiveness. Is that correct?
I would tell people all the time, the kind of people who came to our forgiveness classes were often people whose ex-husbands or wives had cheated on them, drunk their, life savings away, didn't pay child support. I would tell so many people, make sure you go to court and get the child support that's owed you, but do it because you love your kid, not because you hate your ex. And that's where justice can change. You do it out of some affection, love, goodwill, belief in justice, not just hatred and revenge. Justice is necessary.
I love that. There was a quote I was reading somewhere that without justice, it would be difficult to maintain peace. That is important. Now, I have a question for you. What do you like about what you're doing? What is the benefit for you? I mean, what is the satisfaction for you, if I put it differently?
It's good to be able to help folks. It seems like, in terms of being happy, people have to have positive meaning in their lives, that happiness is not primarily pleasure, that it's like some sense of satisfaction, some sense that you're in the right place, and some sense that your life has value. My life has value when I can share what I know.
Thank you so much for that. It's been a pleasure talking to you about your work and your belief and your sacrifice. Let's put it like that. No, what you are putting in the world. I really appreciate that. It has been an honor here.
Thank you. And it's not been a sacrifice. It's really been a privilege that even after all this time, even as old as I am, people still want to talk to me. That's a gift.
Thank you so much for that. That is a good gift.
Thank you very much. I wish you well.